Well, Dr. Simon Howell is a criminologist. He joins us now. Dr. Howell, good morning to you. I do appreciate the time. We've all taken a little bit of time to sort of digest what the President said last night. As I understand it, even before the pandemic, the murder detection rate in South Africa had fallen to about 12%. It's probably around 10% now. In other words, if you committed a murder, there was a 10% chance that you would be convicted. We've also seen, over the same period, over the last, let's call it 20 years, a huge amount of political infighting within the police. Am I right to say there must be a relationship between the infighting, the politics, the claims of corruption, and the fact that so few of our murders are ever solved?
Well, I think there is definitely a correlation between the two. I would hazard to guess that, or hazard to say that there's causation directly. But I mean, it is clear that the ongoing fighting within SAPS, the politicization of policing overall, has fundamentally undermined the police service as a unit, and especially at an operational level, to engage with and ultimately secure and find safety for our communities across South Africa. So, I mean, in this instance, and this, I mean, as many have mentioned before, this is an ongoing issue within SAPS. I mean, one only needs to look at the crime intelligence division to realize how far or how much a division can be undermined by the political infighting of the leadership.
I mean, so much hangs on this. There's an issue around legitimacy. Policing is about consent. You're not forced to do something at gunpoint by a police officer normally. You follow their instructions, don't speed. How can you say to people, don't speed, don't go through red robots, when the police minister is now on really an effective suspension, when we keep hearing claims of criminality right at the top of the police? I mean, isn't this one of the fundamental problems? We don't trust and respect police officers, partly because of what we've seen.
Entirely. I mean, I think the relationship between the police and the public has fundamentally broken down. And, I mean, as a result of that deficit of trust, the policing by consent model has been called into question. I mean, I just don't think that people consent to be policed by an organization which has thus far indicated that there are significant problems with the leadership of that organization. And I mean, this is magnified within SAPS because of the hierarchical nature of that leadership, in the sense that, so long as the leaders are busy doing or engaging with whatever, or not focusing on policing, the rest of the organization is left floundering and left without that critical rudder that provides leadership on the whole.
There's so many different elements, which is a journalistic way of saying there's a lot going on here. And I was interested in what we see to be gestures of public support for Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, the KwaZulu-Natal Police Provincial Commissioner, who made the claims against the Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. And you would think that actually, just, if you had a provincial police commissioner who holds a public press conference, makes claims like this without telling the president, without telling, I presume, the National Police Commission, although he must have known, he would be someone who would be suspended too. And that hasn't happened. How do you sort of assess that decision by the president to allow Mkhwanazi to stay in his post?
Well, I sense on the one hand there's the political aspect to that, which I mean, that could be subject to a further discussion. But I think what people are looking for and what the public wants is a leader within SAPS who stands up and holds ground and says we are going to engage with and undermine criminal networks. And that's exactly what Mkhwanazi has done, is that he stood his ground and he's stood up and said, this is what needs to happen. And I think that type of firm leadership is ultimately what the public is looking for more than anything else. And the president recognizes that, in this vacuum that now has been created by the ongoing concerns around the police minister. This, at least from a public perspective or from a PR perspective, gives the public what they want, which is that type of leadership.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's so many different parts of it. It's interesting that the police minister, he's released a couple of statements, but if someone made claims like Mkhwanazi did against me, I would hold a press conference and shout into every single microphone. You wouldn't be able to get me to shut up. The minister didn't really do that. And the presidency is kind of bowing to Mkhwanazi in a way. And the police commissioner, Fani Masemola, I know that we took a press conference of his live last week on Newzroom Afrika channel 405, but he's got to be a key player in this somehow.
Well, I think, everyone is trying to establish their own political fiefdoms or grounds. And, I think everyone is positioning themselves in relation to one another so as that when this becomes a broader issue, which it will likely become when the judicial inquiry is launched and gets going, I think ultimately people are now trying to vie for position and find themselves a place which is both, on one hand, as safe as possible, but equally as politically expedient as possible. And, I think that's what we're seeing now as a result of that.
There are different types of commissions, obviously, and they conduct themselves in their own way. And the chair of the commission, Judge Madlanga in this case, will be able to make up the rules that they will abide by. But the Zondo Commission, which did everything in public, and we saw almost all of it happen in public. I mean, it was amazing to watch. I don't know if this commission will be held in the same way. If I recall, the commission that was chaired by Professor Sandy Africa into the violence in KwaZulu-Natal in 2021 was not public in the same way. Should this commission be held in public too? I mean, should we see Senator Mkhunu answering the questions? Should we see Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi being cross-examined on his claims?
Well, one would like to see that, but I sense that there will be some confidentiality and security concerns around the type of information that they will be discharging or, speaking to. So there may be limitations. For me, what is important is that action actually occurs and is a result from the commission. And simply, having another talk shop is not going to solve these problems. What is needed is significant action, both from a leadership perspective, but also on the ground. People need to change the way in which things are done, and that ultimately, while the commission may justify it, requires some volition and the like, and that's what I hope to see from the inquiry.
The inquiry has been given quite a broad remit in terms of recommendations it can make about individuals, about people in the past, about people, but also, as I understand it, about structure. And one of the things that we've seen in the past is that the president has had the power, the legal authority, to appoint a national police commissioner, which has really rendered the police minister kind of, I remember watching for years Charles Ngakula, Safety and Security Minister as he then was, having to basically defend Jackie Salebi, who was appointed by President Mbeki and was being protected by Mbeki, as we now know. Charles Ngakula could do nothing about it. What kind of recommendations or what kind of examination do you think this commission should look at with regards to structure? Let me simplify it. Should the president really still have the power to unilaterally appoint a police commissioner?
Well, I think on the one hand, what is key, what is needed is that the borders between the police minister's operation or mandate and the police commissioner's mandate need to be defined and redefined, if anything, because as a result of a number of ministers and a number of police commissioners, Bheki Cele comes to mind, of undermining those borders. I think it's become quite fluid and it's largely a grey zone as to who does what and where. And if anything, the Judicial Commission needs to examine those structures and to reinvigorate them or re-highlight them or redevelop them so as that the borders between the two justify each position as well as possible. Because at the moment, I think this is one of the big issues, is that there's simply that grey zone allows for a lot of overlap, and that overlap is not useful nor is constitutionally mandated. The minister's concern should be about policy and the commissioner should be about operationals. And at the moment, those two, as a result of interfering with one another, I think we've ended up in a position where we are today.
It's obviously tempting to hope that this commission will bring an end to politicization in the South African police service. I kind of think it won't happen. I wonder how difficult it actually is to remove politicization from the police. If you listen to Professor Mary de Haas, who's been watching the situation in KZN for many years, she has said, again, quite recently, that police in KwaZulu-Natal has been politicized for years and years and years to try, and that might be one of the reasons why so many of the actors in this case come from KwaZulu-Natal. I don't know that for sure, of course. But it seems to me that actually we might hope that politicization will be removed from the police service, but it probably won't happen now. It's very difficult to do.
I agree. I think one of the key issues around policing in the country is that it has been politicized to such an extent, especially, in terms of the leadership. But, there's a deeper problem here, and I think that's fundamentally relates to the way in which the police are understood and their position within the larger organs of state. I think we forget that the police are a state institution and not a government institution. And so long as the borders between the government and state continue to be grey, there's always going to be this overlap and meddling with state organs and state institutions that ultimately should be completely independent of government and of politics. You know, and that's the purpose of having the separation of powers and the state set up in the way it is. But thus far, at least, we've seen, this overlap between governments and governance and the state, which has spilled over and has resulted in the mess that is ultimately, SAPS's leadership at the moment.
Dr. Simon Howell, thank you, criminologist. Really do appreciate your thoughts on a very complex issue with many, many moving parts. Well,